Hi, my name's Kirra, and I'm a junior here at HPA. So, all of you know that women make up a huge portion of the world population, almost 50%. And it's no secret that this group hasn't always been treated equally, especially in the workplace. Fortunately, the US has become much more accepting of women reaching higher education and working outside the home. And this shift in culture has greatly benefited the economy. So, for the purpose of keeping this short and sweet, I'm going to simplify economics and country development into GDP. There's a pretty basic way in which GDP and population growth intertwine, and this is that for countries with a high GDP and low population growth, economic and social problems ensue. So, logically, for a country like the US, for example, which has the highest GDP in the world as of 2019, a low population growth would be bad. So the NIR, which is the natural increase rate, compares the birth and death rates of a country to show how the population changes. And as of 2015, the NIR for the US was negative 1.1. So rolling back to my previous statement about GDP and population growth, this doesn't have good implications for the future. So this rate is decreasing because the birth rate is declining. But why is that? A huge cause is that women are entering the workforce. Since 1970, which is around the time that the NIR stopped increasing and began to plateau, the percentage of women working outside the home shifted from about 29% to 57% of women, which turns out to be nearly half of the workforce. And for comparison, about 68% of men are participating in the US workforce. Now, all these females entering the workforce has actually grown the economy 11% more than it would have without female participation. So, great, women are entering the workforce, but on the other hand, are having less children. Which leads me to this. Did you know that in the US, employers are not required to offer paid maternity leave? This motivates already working women to not have children and therefore not lose out on profit that they could be using to sustain themselves, rather than to try and stretch to accommodate for another person. This leaves the US as the only country in the developed world that does not have mandatory paid maternity leave. In fact, Canada offers a year, the UK offers 39 weeks, and Norway offers up to 91 weeks. Whereas the US only requires 12 weeks of unpaid maternity leave to be offered. This lack of paid maternity leave augments itself in the face of single mothers. There's a 10% decrease of income in a household during the month in which childbirth takes place. But for single mothers, this decrease becomes 50%. Additionally, paid maternity leave is associated with better retention and job performance among mothers, higher household income, and economic growth. Another struggle for working mothers is a lack of flexibility for hours. With a child, especially single mothers, struggle to find time to spend with their child or someone to watch their child while they're away at work, and more flexible hours would help them to be able to do this. Another aspect that plays into this is a lack of paid sick days, some of which could be used to watch their child if they can't find someone else, or if their child's sick and a daycare or a babysitter refuses to watch them. More so, mandatory paid medical leave and family leave would benefit mothers for the same reason. They would allow mothers to take better care of their family while still participating in the US workforce and contributing to their household income, which, once again, if they're single mothers, their income is the only income in their household. So what part do all these play in affecting the United States economy? I've touched on this, but let me put all the pieces together. The natural increase rate, as I mentioned earlier, is negative in the US, but it's been near stagnant for a long time, meaning a low, zero, or negative increase in population growth, and a low increase in the future's economy. An easy way to change this fate is if women are given more of a choice to have children. And this can happen via longer paid maternity leave, more flexible hours, more paid sick days, mandatory paid medical leave, and mandatory paid family leave. If these policies were implemented, women would feel more comfortable having children in today's society. therefore increasing the natural increase rate and the future's economy. My mother's been working for many years and initially worked as a dental hygienist when her and my dad first got married. And at that time, she made most of the money because my dad was still in residency. So she couldn't afford to have kids without a paid maternity leave or an increase in my dad's salary. So she didn't for a while. Eventually, my parents moved to Hawaii, and my dad made enough money where my mom was able to quit her job to stay home and watch kids. But this meant she had to choose between a career which she had loved and worked for, or watching her children. So eventually, she decided to have kids, and at 37, she gave birth to me, and then gave birth to my sister at 40, and only recently went back to work. Now, my mom is a prime example of a woman in today's society, unable to physically or financially support children with the current laws that are in place regarding working mothers. If she had had a mandatory paid maternity leave for 3 years, as Finland does, she wouldn't have had to choose between her children and her job, but rather she could have had her children and gone back to work in 3 years, knowing that she still had a place at her office. My mother actually had it easier than many other women, such as single mothers, who rely solely on their own income and aren't able to quit their job to watch their kids. But if she had it so easy, why was it still so hard for her? And it was hard because all these variables aren't taken into account when these laws are being passed. And instead, things like whether to offer paid maternity leave are left up to employers, many of whom are trying to increase their profit and decide not to offer it. Essentially, whether a woman wants to raise a child or be a CEO or do both, she should have the option to choose. I want these laws to change so that when I, along with many other young women, join the workforce, we don't have to choose between our children or our career, but rather we're capable of doing both and deciding based on how we feel and what we want out of life. Thank you.